because when this was pointed out to me, at that stage, I wasn't really looking for ethical teaching or how to how to live a good life and all that. I mean, and maybe I just because I had that before, I had been acquainted with that. Mm-hmm. But sometimes that may not be. It may not work so well. Just say you are that and stuff like that, and so that's why it can't be. I don't think it can't be fixed either. You can't just say for every single person, you start here.
Yes, that's very true.
It actually has to be completely. That's why actually meetings like this are a little bit iffy, because most of the people that I know that I've met that understand this and stuff, where it really is juicy and really is very effective is mostly when you're talking individually. Mm-hmm. Because then you have your question and it's at this level and it's that particular issue. And it's a kind of a mixed group. It's kind of hard to, because somebody might be out there. So,
that shows up in your books a little bit because you're answering people's
specific things. Questions. Yeah, and I'm not really quite. I know people that know this that won't talk in groups, just as a matter of principle. They say this doesn't really work. It's not the right thing. Mm-hmm. And certainly when it gets into the big thing where there's like 500 people and it becomes a lecture where there's not even an interaction anymore, I question that because who's benefiting? Yeah. And we can go listen to a lecture on kind of non-duality, maybe get something out of it. But in the past, usually it was done in a very intimate way where you basically approached somebody with your particular issue, and then they were able to say, well, okay, and give you something that was really only for you, because you may not be, if there is a graduated thing, let's assume that there is, you may not, certain things you may have accomplished.
Yeah. Well, that's what was it? I was just reading this from your book, that Nisargadatta said, I'm not interested in what you let go, I'm interested in what you're still holding on.
Yeah.
So if you meet a teacher, you're right, it's very personalized because you might be still holding on to something, and it's that you need, that's your starting point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I don't know.
My email and Maggie's. So take this over.
Well, I guess we'll see. Does everybody think they're here? If I give it a few more minutes,
Yeah, there's a few people.
we can just wait. But there's got some some folks from this morning, and then we have some new folks as well, or mostly. Who's new? Just curious. Okay.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
John, is that last song you sang, is that downloadable on the net yet?
No, it's not actually. I haven't done much recording lately, so that one's not there. Somebody, I did have some songs up there, and somebody downloaded them and then put them onto YouTube somewhere.
Yeah.
So there's a few up there that are kind of like demos or something, home recordings. It's hard recording, I tell you, though. That's a whole thing in itself. It's pretty involved. So are the new folks that come, are you guys pros and old hands at this stuff already? Hold their own.
I saw you at Darcy's house last.
Okay, good. So, yeah, it's always kind of like where do you start? But the thing is, like I was saying earlier, there's really not too much. There's some basic points, and it all keeps. It's more like a hologram thing. It keeps coming back again and again and again to the basic position. So I guess it doesn't exactly matter where you start. Most of the people that I knew, like Nisargadatta, I didn't know him, but I knew of him, and Sailor Bob and others. That very few people that I ever met ever laid this out linearly as if it was a lecture course. They basically just sat there and said, "Well, what's on your mind?" It was very formalist, kind of very unstructured, and maybe there's a reason for that if you think about it. When you see sometimes people talking about non-duality or some kind of spirituality, and they've got the chalkboard up, and they got the writing on the whiteboard and all this stuff, and that's. But that's that's almost like presenting conceptual knowledge. So we were talking at break that the old statement that the word is not the thing. Any word is not what it represents, and so if we talk about reality or our true nature as the target of this stuff, whatever we say about it technically is is already missing the point. So that's why I wouldn't. I think that's why people wouldn't, and generally are not as in favor of, let's say, passing out like the handouts. Here are the handouts on non-duality. Let's all kind of sit here and kind of study it or something like that. That's my theory on it. I've never met anybody into this stuff that ever approached it that way. And I think it's not because they couldn't or didn't want to, but I think that the subject matter itself almost necessitated that. Especially like we were just saying, if they usually almost always did it in a small group or individual format. And I was talking to one guy who understands this a while ago, and he just kind of sat there. And I said, I don't have anything to say. Nothing wrong with anybody. There's nothing to get. It's all fine. What do you have to say? And if you didn't have anything to say, then he didn't have anything to say, and then nobody had anything to say, and you're on your way. He said to me, he said, you don't think I walk? He said, when I'm at home by myself, you don't think I walk around talking about this to myself? So so that is a way that this could be approached too. Is that you literally just if there's a question. Some of the teachers, there's some satsang teachers that I used to go to years ago that took that style. They basically just come and kind of sit here. Kind of looking and stuff, and they can go like an hour in total silence. Nothing to say. If you say something, okay. And I can see the reason for that too, because if nobody has a question, what are you supposed to say? Yeah. See, there is one though.
If there's no one there, because we're non-conceptual awareness, so there's no choice because there's no one to make a choice. How exactly do choices come around? It's just grace.
Well, it's a thing called
oneness coming through.
It's a thing called the brain, I guess. So the human brain. No, choices happen all the time. Doing happens all the time. See, that's a misunderstanding in Advaita circles. Again, this is how I see that. There's a very prevalent pointer that nobody can do anything. I don't know where they get this absurd idea, because everybody knows all day long, that there are choices and doings and activities. So what that pointer is not so much the doing or the choosing, which is obvious, self-evident. It's what that is attributed to or how it's owned. So I don't like to. So I'd rather. It's not throwing out the choosing or the doing, because otherwise somebody would say. If you're very logical and thorough with that, you'd say there's no doer here, because somebody in some non-duality thing says there's no doer. So you just kind of sit here, and you'd sit here, and you'd sit here, and you'd sit here. Moss would start growing on your head, and there's nobody to do anything. But that's not what happens actually. So so doing happens. It's something Buddha said, that, as I recall, that I think is more accurate. He said, there is doing, but there is no one who is doing it. Like that. So anyway, the choices in doing and activities go on. And the easiest way to see that is just look at any organic experience, or something like breathing, or your body or your heart beating, and really look at that to see if it's being done by a separate person, or if it's being done by an ego or some entity, or is it actually, like my heart, as far as I can tell, is just beating. Now, the concept I'm doing that is irrelevant to that activity. But if I had that concept, it would be kind of artificial, like I'm sitting here, I'm beating my heart. You'd say, well, he's nuts, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He thinks he's beating his heart. So the funny thing is, you can drop the concept part of it to see that doesn't apply, and yet the action is still going on. So, and you can actually, take that all the way out to the circulation and the chemistry and the hair growing and all that stuff, and the same type of thing applies. Food digesting. Well, why not just let that viewpoint just go right up to the brain itself, just another organ creating thoughts and decisions and doing things and choosing, and that's all happening. Because somehow words are coming out here. Now, am I choosing what I'm going to say? No. And I don't think anybody's really doing it that way. So it is happening. So that's where we get into this thing. If I start saying, I'm beating the heart, I'm creating the thoughts, I'm in control, I'm running the show, it's me, 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 that's how it's functioning. I guess my take on that is it's just an incorrect assessment. It's not functioning that way. But the funny thing is, it's not any change to what's always been going on anyway. Like your heart's always been beating, your thoughts have always been coming, the decisions have been happening. So the only thing in this style of talking about it is the unnecessary part, in my view. It's that looking at all these things and referencing them to that concept that we talked about earlier today about the separate I being not what you truly are, but just an image. So we get into this weird kind of assumption that it's that image that's doing everything. But I don't think it is the image that's doing everything. And that it's actually it's very relaxing and like kind of freeing and kind of liberating to realize that it's not all depending on me. Like as this person somehow I've got to be so concerned, because people are always thinking, what should I do? Well, or what should I think, or is this the right thing, or feeling responsible or burdened because of this and that, but that's more like because of that concept of taking that personal ownership as if you ever were doing that. That's how I see that. And so if we examine that and start to see that doesn't hold up so much, the burden and the responsibility, this personal ownership of all this stuff happening, just kind of envision that kind of, just like right now, if I let go of the idea I'm beating my heart, it just kind of relaxes me and it still goes on. So you can maybe get a sense of that by just seeing how it would be if your thinking and deciding and memories and everything was just kind of happening due to a kind of intelligence, just the body mind. It knows what to do. And it's effortless, really. I don't have to struggle to beat my heart. And then even these things like choices and kind of what should I do, you find that also happens. And people are agonizing, God, I've got to decide, what should I do? Should I do that? But I kind of found out also that eventually, it's been happening all along anyway. The choices happen, the actions happen, and it didn't need that. So that's my interpretation of that. It's not, we can't do anything, and then people get into all these things of, well, I guess it gets very convoluted because, for example, the big one that I see out there in spirituality is they think there is a final enlightenment or an awakening, and then which I disagree with, and I've talked about that today. But take that concept and then marry it into this doership thing, or that there's nobody to do it, and put those things together, and you get basically people that are just driving themselves crazy because they're saying, I really want to get this kind of state because they tell me that I should get enlightened, but then they tell me that there's nobody here to do anything, so I can't do anything. And it's kind of like, well, I want to do that, but there's nobody to do anything, and then this gets married together, and then the third thing is, well, it will just happen. If it's meant to happen, there's nothing you can do about it. So people go to those meetings, and I've been to some of those meetings where that was the teaching, and they're just basically waiting for something to happen. I guess the final understanding will happen, but there's no doer. And I was like, wow. It's like, and I think this was being promoted as kind of a non-duality. But I would question all of those concepts as being kind of a distortion of it. So if you drop out the notion of a final understanding, and then you drop out this artificial non-doer position, and then you drop out the need to wait around, just leave that all out of the picture. It's so freeing. Take a deep breath and see what's here, and see what these non-dual teachers were actually saying. They weren't saying, there's a final understanding, you'll get it, you can't do it, it will happen. They were actually saying the total opposite. That you're already free, and it's already here, and it's all fulfilled. So and somehow, when I put those side by side, it's like one's black and one's white. I mean, one's dualism, and one is a kind of a pure non-dualism. And I think that the Ramanas and all those teachers like that, I think they were clearly in the camp of that you are that already. So I don't know. That's why part of what I was saying this morning was part of what this could be about, or one of the reasons to talk about this is a little bit of deconstruction on some of these concepts, some of these non-duality concepts, because they hang us up. Instead of seeing the simplicity and seeing who you are, and then being at peace with the truth of what things really are, we can actually get into kind of some bondage with all these dubious notions. But we don't need to. It's just that we didn't really hear that these things were conceptual. And if we go back, a lot of people too into non-duality, into Advaita, that go to satsang, it seems to me they're not that familiar with some of the source teaching, like Ramana. I mean, a lot of people say, like, there's a lot of people teaching that were influenced by Papaji and all that kind of stuff, and there's a lot of good stuff in that. But it could be useful if you feel drawn to it too, to actually just go right back to the source and see what was actually said. And it's very shocking, actually. Like if you read some of that stuff in the simplicity of it, and what these people were actually saying. And I found it's kind of revealing sometimes when you find it's in many ways a complete undermining of what is going on in spirituality, or what people are saying that this is about. And then you go back to someone like that and you see, well, what did he actually say? And it's like, well, what is it? He seems to be saying the complete opposite. And so that's important, So I think
you were saying this morning that there are lots of people out there saying you need to dissolve all your conditioning, and there seemed to be the idea that the presence will be more stable without your conditioning. But if the conditioning is met with the awareness of non-conceptual awareness, then the conditioning is just happening.
Yeah, and in truth, I was saying too that the idea of conditioning is itself a concept in the sense of, I think if we come back to direct experience, what you see, let's say we're just sitting here and we're just kind of drop everything that we know and looking at direct experience. I mean, all I ever found was maybe some perceptions or a feeling or two, or maybe an individual thought just kind of coming and going and basically disappearing. I don't see anything abiding. I don't see anything lasting. I don't see any bogeyman out there. I just see these things that are completely ephemeral, that have no real substance, and they just come and go, and they're gone forever. Now, where is the conditioning? So that thought may come up. I have conditioning. But it could be kind of interesting, and this is the way that I look at it, is if you could do a freeze frame in that moment where the mind was telling me I'm a being with conditioning, and you could just kind of like pause everything and look at what was happening. The only thing in that moment is only that thought. There's nothing else there. There's this. That's this whole tricky thing about concepts, is the mind is saying all of these things. I'm separate, and I have conditioning, and there's something wrong with me, and it's really serious, and it's really real, and it's this and it's that. But it's almost like a lot of hand waving, but there's like no substance. It's kind of like with the Wizard of Oz, when the guy was behind the curtain, very imposing, the big smoke in the mirror, and then Toto went over and he pulled the curtain, and there was like this little afraid man back there. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. He doesn't know anything. That's what they were saying in the movie. So the whole thing was a complete, kind of like a complete put on. There was no big ferocious Oz. So this separation and all of these effects seemingly that come out of it. Like once I say that I'm limited and I'm small and there's something wrong with me, and I allow that, or I grant that, God, the mind could just pile on all kinds of thoughts. But look at them, pull them apart, tease them apart a little bit, and see what's real. See what the substance is behind that. Where is this separate, limited person that stands apart from the being, or whatever? And if we say, I'm a being with conditioning, okay, that's an interesting thought. Put that thought aside, and where is the conditioning? It's in your back pocket. Is it over there in a pile somewhere? I've got a lot of conditioning. I've got 40 years of conditioning and all that. But it's a way of talking, and there is a way. If we grant all these kinds of concepts and say, well, granted that I am separate, granted that there is a mind, granted that there is conditioning, granted. Okay, you grant all that. Then of course, it looks that way, and that's what people do. They say, well, there is a separate self and all this stuff, and okay, but the only thing I would say is just realize that you had to go ahead and concede that point first. Now, if we say, I am conceding that point, there is a separate self in a world, there is time and space, and there is all these effects of that duality. I say I'm not going to question that, I'm just going to accept that. Then, okay, let's talk about the way the world looks through that concept. As we were talking about before, just a second ago, is that you could have you can do that, and that's what a lot of the religions are basically saying. Be a good person and do this and meditate and don't have bad karma and study the teachings, and it's all good, assuming the separation. And that's why meetings like this is not something that is like for the general kind of audience, or something that people would be interested in. Because you can go to a big congregation, a big church or something like that with 5,000 people and say, be a good person and do this and do that. And at that level, it seems to make a lot of sense for them. But if this wouldn't be the right discussion to say there's nobody there. So it depends on we were saying earlier, a lot of this is really, it's kind of hard to generalize it because, where does each individual person stand in that particular moment? So it's a little bit tricky to kind of come up with this is non-duality, this is the way that it works. Because each and everything you say is ultimately invalid. So Ramana did used to say, sometimes the best language is silence. But he seemed to talk a lot too. He seemed to fill up 600 pages. For the silent saint, 6 talks with Ramana is like that thick. He could flap his jaws like anybody else, I guess. Yeah.
There did seem to be some transmission, however, because someone would ask a question of Ramana, and he would just sit in silence, and then the question and the questioner would just evaporate.
Yeah, I've heard that. But, yeah. I experience things like that sometimes in talking to different people. The way that I would take that is, at least happened with me sometimes too, is that what I found is on the other side, the person was not supporting the concepts anymore, and it didn't put you back. It didn't put a box or anything on you, and suddenly you kind of opened up to this idea that you could be present without the concepts, and then you felt like a peace or a clarity. And I think, and then people would sometimes say, well, Ramana transmitted it to me, and I think that, to me, that's not quite accurate. But in that dialogue where there was no more support for the concept, and suddenly you kind of realized, I don't need my concept, and there was nobody putting any other concept back on you, and you could just be like, wow, peace. Clarity, sense of stillness or whatever. Wow, amazing. So again, then it's always then what people might describe it retroactively in different ways, and that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it can be a little bit of a trap too, because then you say, well, a lot of people right now are rushing off to Arunachala all the time. Got to go to Arunachala. Got to go there. Got to get to the mountain. Okay, I don't know, whatever, but. It depends on it depends on what you mean. See, Arunachala means it means being. Arunachala means the red hill, and that's the name of that hill. But red stands for fire or consciousness, the light of consciousness, and the hill stands for the immovable being. So Arunachala really means the self, or like your being. So the Arunachala is sitting right there. The ever-present self and consciousness, and that's kind of the heights of it. Now we might think at some level, if I should go over there so I can get it or something like But it depends. Again, if we just take it off the top and basically see the deepest meaning of what that means, then you don't have to go anywhere. But if I say, well, I'm a separate person and I'm outside of the absolute and I'm feeling limited, I'd like to get some kind of extra support for me, then I might have this idea that if I go there, it would be helpful for me. So all I can say is, well, it just depends on where you stand. And that's why you can't even criticize that. It's not like, if you felt you were separate and you had faith in that and you did go, you might feel something. But at the end of the day, you're still going to find, when it's all said and done, that whatever peace and being and consciousness that you touch into has always been with you from the start anyway. So that's what it is. So it's just like we were talking before. It's all like a language game. It's all of what you mean. And the bottom line is everybody is already undoubtedly present and aware, and they are the self, and it's all done, and there's no separation. That's the basic truth of it. That's why Rama is saying, just be what you are. He says, and that's the end of the ignorance. And so sometimes we just get to a point where we just kind of just take that in at that level and just say, okay, it's like I'm done trying to sort it out and figure it out and conceptualize it. Maybe I'm just going to have a look and see if what they're pointing to is just simply true. And that gets very exciting there, because you're just saying, well, now I'm going to look at my being and see basically what I am. And but for many years I didn't do that either. I say, well, that's great, but I'm not there yet. So I was obviously, and I'm still conceding that separation. But at some point you can't concede it anymore, because the facts of it or the simplicity of it becomes so overwhelming that it gets hard to deny. Like, let's say your being. Now, we can deny that and say, well, yeah, I have a being, but that's not it, or maybe there's another being or something like that. But we can't actually deny our actual being. And then at some point, we might get a little curious. Somebody will say, well, didn't you know that the being that's here, that you can't deny, that actually is it, or that actually is the true self? And you start hearing these pointers. They start coming in. Maybe at first you kind of say, well, that's great, But at some point you actually kind of start to think, I wonder if it really is true. What if my being actually is that? What if there is no difference between Ramana's being and my being, or however you conceive of that, And then you start to look. But I always had an escape clause in my spiritual searching of, yeah, but. It's like kind of like, yeah, there's being, but. Or yeah, it is me in some ultimate sense, but. Or, there's some reason why it's not quite, I'm not fully there, or I'm not fully enlightened, or whatever it is, or somebody else has it, or somebody else definitely has it, but I don't have it. All these kind of, but these are just like the mind saying, but. And maybe at some point, we're going to get tired of that, or kind of question that a little bit. Without the yeah buts, without the but, and just set it aside and basically see, well, what is the nature of my experience? And then these questions get very curious, very interesting, like, is my being changing? Is my being coming and going? Is my being conscious or not? Is it suffering? Is it limited? Is it the body? Is it an object? Or all these things are, to me, very fascinating, and anybody can start asking those and looking at those anytime they want to. There's nothing preventing that. And to me, that's when this really comes alive, as you start to look and check this stuff out and compare it to direct experience. So like, what if it turns out that your simple being that's with you right now is it? That's it. It's the end of it. And what if it's peaceful and unchanging, and what if it's already free of the mind, and what if it's not conditioned, and what if it's Satchitananda, and whatever? What would that mean, What if it's, as I was saying this morning, the implications of something like that. It's like, oh, it's pretty interesting. Because if it is, it's over with. Because where's the path? Where's the practice? Where's the attainment? Where's the getting it? Where's the losing conditioning? If this being that is it, and you, with or without the conditioning or thought, it doesn't even change that. It has no effect. If you look at right now, whatever you're thinking has no effect on just simple being at all. And, what if that means everything you think, say, do, imagine, conceive, or do, or whatever you feel, or whatever, what if it is doesn't alter that fact? And what if you realize, I can't possibly get out of my being, I can't lose it, there's nothing I can do to shake it, I can't deny it, even in my suffering or in my conceptualizing, when my mind is racing 100 miles an hour, there is my being and all of its self-evidentness, I still can't deny it. And what if there's absolutely nothing that can ever occur that would really contradict that presence? And the good news is, it's not like the presence, it's you, it's your essence, it's your it's yourself, because we say, wait a minute, there's this thing called being or consciousness, that's great, okay, and then there's me. Okay, well, but then look at that. Well, is it really like there is being and then that there's you? That you're standing out there somewhere looking over there at the being? Is that really what it's like? Or is it that the being is what you are, or whatever? Or is it like, not that there's you and then consciousness, but you are conscious? So to me, that's the non-duality, is when you start recognizing that, whatever that is being pointed to, and then it starts to kind of emerge that you're not different than that. So if you're not different from, if the being consciousness that is it, and you look in your experience, it's here, it's beyond any doubt, you can't find any separation, there's nothing that you can do to lose it, and none of these activities actually impact it, any more than clouds just going through the sky. Like somebody was saying this morning, what do you do? Where do you go from there? You don't go anywhere from there. There's nowhere to go from there, and you didn't even get enlightened. And you can't go tell your friends that I got enlightened because you didn't get anything. You can't even say I got it. Because did you actually get anything? So, I wanted to say that I got it or whatever, and tell my friends that I got enlightened and stuff. And it's kind of like you actually can't really say that in my experience. But it doesn't really matter, because you can step out of the suffering and the problems, and you don't have all that stuff to deal with. But you can't just. The reason that you can't say that is you can't claim it or retrofit it back into a person. You can't say it because it's not a personal thing.
Yep, John.
Yeah.
What comes up for me is like, what happens to the dysfunctional behavior? Because a lot of times I find myself just automatically doing something that I really don't. It's like it's not good, and yet I feel trapped by that sometimes because the consciousness isn't. If I had thought about it, I wouldn't have done it. But do you find that those kinds of behaviors kind of? I hate to call it addiction, but it's a kind of it's a compulsive kind of wired into the brain, because they've actually done studies about the brain that there are synapses.
And you may not be able to do a darn thing about it.
Yeah,
so the first thing I would say before even addressing it is that there's a little bit of a trap in the question. My compulsive behavior, I did this, I don't like this,
right.
It's this. There's a lot of conceptualizing wrapping around the way we're interpreting that. See, we're saying there is no separate self.
But I still, this being has to deal with the consequences.
Which being?
Well, the consequences happen.
They do happen, don't they? Yeah, it's true.
And there's a dislike of that, but then that's the me disliking it.
That's right. Yeah. So what I found is that, and I'm not trying to say let's all be chipper about dysfunctional things and ignore all that. No, because this consciousness is very intelligent, it's very sensitive, and it's very compassionate. It has a holistic thing, and it doesn't feel right intuitively. But what I would say though is let's at least remove these kind of major conceptual perspectives to kind of let the smoke clear a little bit and see what's left. Because a lot of this agitation and suffering and psychological stuff is being driven by these concepts. And as that kind of just settles out, a lot of it takes care of itself.
That's what I was hoping.
Now,
Yeah.
it leaves a body-mind functioning in the appearance, in some capacity. Good, bad, and different. Now, I think, but also it's a transitory thing. Born, dies, lives, does its thing, and it's a very limited expression. And it is impermanent. It is in duality. It is driven by its biology and by its conditioning and by its background and training and all that. And I don't think that will ever change. And we're not trying to make the body-mind superhuman. But we're starting to look at the body-mind as not such a personal thing. My body, my mind, my choices, my dysfunction. Oh, that's me, and that means something about me. That's the part I would question a little bit.
Yeah, the guilt and shame.
And the
that
guilt,
goes
because
along.
there's a little bit of that ownership and identity, that personalizing of that starts to more have a flavor of the I thought. Like a thought comes up or an expression comes up, and it's in truth, it's just an expression, and it will come and it will pass, and that's the end of it. But there's a part of the mind that basically says, I did that, or that's, let's say the body mind did something, and then something comes in and says, well, that was dysfunctional, that was wrong, or something like that. But a large part of that is a conceptual evaluation. So, not to excuse all action and all that stuff, but still, I would say that a large amount of that kind of feeling and experience of all that stuff is addressed with just simply knowing who you are. And whatever is left of a body-mind functioning, don't forget that it's taking place within this intelligence and this consciousness that is no longer looking through the eyes of separation and personal doership and ownership. So even if the body-mind is struggling, let's say, in the appearance, but when it's not being looked at through the eyes of a separate ego anymore, then what's it look like from the perspective of consciousness that's one and inclusive? And I think it starts to shift over to, my view anyway, is intelligence or compassion or insight functioning now through what's left, let's say. And then you might say, like, hey, I need to improve something. I need to get some relationship skills, or I need to get job skills, or I need to improve my health, or something just practical like that. But these bodies, when I look at them from how I look at this now, there's these little pieces of protoplasm kind of dangling there between life and death, and very limited and very very incomplete in some way, and how could you not have a certain amount of compassion or a certain amount of acceptance or forgiveness for that? I might come out with something that I don't like, or say something that I think about later, like it didn't really resonate. And I still do that sometimes. But what's different is I'm not going to come and beat myself up. I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have said that, this is wrong, oh, there's the universe is suddenly, there's something wrong with everything. Just let that monkey come off. That's just my experience. Let that come off your back, and then just see what's there. And then if something can come up to improve it or deal with it or something practical, that consciousness is there to do that. If it seems like it's even worth it. So many of the things that come up, it's just like, just comes up and goes by. And you realize, well, I wouldn't have, I'm sure everything that comes out of our mouth, we're not going to be like, oh, that's the perfect thing I should have said. Now, I was saying before, I don't know what's coming out of my mouth. I don't think right now, it's almost, the way I look at it, I feel like it's just kind of an emptiness or a void or a clear mirror or something, right? And there's just some stuff bubbling up. And I can't really say that I'm doing it like I was saying before. I really don't know what I'm going to say. Now, what if suddenly an angry word comes out or something that pops out, and I'm like, God, don't like that. But it's not like I planned that anyway. I can suddenly beat myself up and say, why did I do that? Because I don't really think that I did it at that level. Now, but let's say let's say that it came out, and then there was another feeling that came out that said, you know, God, that wasn't very compassionate, or gee, I didn't mean that, or it was maybe my background or something like that, something from my family, or maybe whatever. I mean, I don't know, just something weird off the wall. And I say, and then it might come up to say, you know, hey, I didn't really mean that, or I'm sorry about that. But see, it's all like kind of still going on in a way where it's not a personal, you know, kind of a burden. But it doesn't bar improvement either, because I might say, you know, hey, apparently this body-mind never had a lot of skill, let's say, in relating, or doesn't know much about intimate relationships or something like that. Oh, maybe I'll pick up a book on something like that, and maybe something will improve, you know. Okay, so it's kind of like, you know, so we could recognize, let's say, a certain thing that didn't feel in harmony, or didn't feel up to our deepest view, and then something could happen. But I think the only thing the thing that's missing in that whole scenario, whatever is happening, is this whole thing of, you know, I'm doing it and there's something wrong with me and this shouldn't be happening, and I'm guilty and all that stuff. You know, I don't know, that's how I mean, because that stuff used to drive me crazy. Because everything I did, I was so like, you know, why did I do that, and this is wrong, and I don't like this, and why did this happen to me? I mean, it was very, very burdensome. But now I look at it a little bit differently.
John,
Yeah.
I'd like to go back to the doer, non-doer, because you were starting to make a whole lot of sense for me there, and then it shifted off of that.
Okay.
And sticking with what you just said, well, maybe I'll go out and buy a book.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a doer doing this.
Well, it sounds like.
So could you talk more about that? Somebody bought you an airplane ticket to get you out here.
Yeah.
Was that a doer?
Well, not really.
Okay.
Your hand is going like this.
Could you explain
Your
that?
hand is going like this.
Uh-huh.
That, you know, there must be some doer in there pulling the levers. Well, I don't know. I don't think so. But it depends on what you mean again. You know, there's a brain, body, mind functioning. So, you know, and then for convenience in language, we have this construct called an I. Or, you know, somebody says John, and then I say yes, and they say come here, and I go there. But that word John is not what I am in the deepest sense. So, like, you have a name. That name isn't really what you are, and yet you use it. And people would say, out of all these people in the room, that body has that name, and if I call, somehow that body responds to that. So, in some conventional way, there's a kind of an appearance of that. But my only question would be, do we see it, you know, do we see, for example, that my name is a convention that I use for a certain practical purpose, or do I think that I am my name? See, if I think I am my name, and somebody says John Wheeler sucks, I got to defend my name.
But can we go back to John Wheeler buying the book, or John Wheeler buying the ticket, airplane ticket? That's the practical part of this that I need.
Somewhere in the appearance, somewhere, some body mind did something. But that was the thing is, that's just a very, it's just a loose, conventional way of speaking. It's not very precise metaphysically or in terms of the ultimate essence of things.
Would it be fair, John, to say that when you practice, kind of life happens and it seems like choices were made, and the key would be there was no investment for you to get an airline ticket, and there was no resistance to get an airline ticket. Airline ticket happened based on results.
That's another way of talking about it.
And somewhere, you know, that's one measurement of life happens.
Yeah.
And you're in the flow. You're not invested in controlling it. You're not investing in who made the choice. And the key would be, for me at least, is that investment and resistance. You know, that I'm not invested in buying the ticket. I'm not resistant in buying the ticket. That would be doer. That would be the me getting involved. But if I'm just in the flow and a ticket is part of the flow and you're here, then to me, there is no doer.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's just, you know.
But that's that's why there's all these different, you know. That's kind of saying, you know, sometimes it gets
Dicey.
well. There's a lot of, you know, this should be happening, this shouldn't, I want this is blah blah blah, and that, you know, that's kind of that's a whole, and there's a whole teaching and pointing around kind of deconstructing that a little bit. The simplest way is that, like, you know, like, look inside your being and find the doer that's doing all these thoughts. I don't think you're going to find anything in there. You will find thoughts happening, but you don't find this, like, this precise reference point, some little man in there doing it all. And or at least that's my perspective. You may find someone in there. I never did find it. Now, this word "I am doing it" comes out of the emptiness as some kind of conventional statement. But if I was to kind of go into an inquiry mode and actually look and try to find where is that I that did it, I'm pretty convinced that I'm not going to find anybody. So like the idea, so that word, I would just say that word "I" is a conventional language construct for practical purposes, for just getting around in the world. But the only thing that I need to see is just be clear that that construct doesn't represent the fullness of my essence. That's not the essence of what I am. And then I can use that, just like I can use the name, I can use John Wheeler. Now I know very clearly that I'm not John Wheeler because I could have been named anything else. And yet anytime I go to fill out a form or at the airline, I always write, you know, I am John Wheeler. But I also know at another level that that's just completely arbitrary. So when we say I'm doing this and I'm doing that, that's what we say kind of conventionally, and that's fine. But you know, in the deepest sense, in looking at that more meditatively or just more of a spiritual perspective, I realize there's a limitation on that it's not the full perspective of what's happening and what I really am. Because that doing and that non-doing, there's still, what I am isn't dependent on, let's say, just the doing. I'm not only there when I'm doing something. When I'm not doing anything, then that doership thing isn't even functioning. Or I don't even have that concept that I'm doing anything, that I didn't disappear. You know, so I think it's just more of a call of clarity of language and not trying to take this full truth of who we are to try to narrow it down and define it and limit it to a concept and then get into this thing that is what I am. Because there are a lot of people that are thinking, you know, that doer or that John Wheeler or that person literally is my being. It is what I am. When that's not happening, I'm not there anymore or something, or life ends or something like that. So even these pointers, you know, they have their limits. Like the whole doership thing, it's not the be-all and end-all as to whether you're the doer or you're not the doer. That's not really, because if you press on that, you know, you're going to find contradictions in there. Like I said a contradiction because I said there's nobody here, and then I said I go out and buy the book. Well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He says one thing 1 minute and another thing another minute. But hopefully, at least I'm not going to get entrapped in that, in the sense of, even that's totally conceptual, but still. But the thing is, I'm not limiting the fullness of what I am into something like that. I am a doer, I'm not a doer. Because you could basically say, look, this whole world arises in consciousness. I'm the consciousness. There's nothing outside of consciousness. This whole thing is basically my being. I'm everything. Sometimes people say that. I'm doing everything. Because consciousness is the one support and it's the one energy and it's doing everything and I am that consciousness. Therefore, I am the supreme all-doer of creation. But that's also just another verbal, but that's just another mind construct. To say that I'm not a doer is a concept. To say that I am a doer is a concept. So we have to be very light with these concepts. What I would be saying though is that the real thing to see in all this is that you are not a concept. So technically you're not a doer, you're not a non-doer. So the mind creates these notions of doing and non-doing and then this and names and non-names and all these things, and it's just on a whiteboard it's putting up all these kind of things, and it's perfectly fine because it's actually very valuable. But to suddenly begin to imagine that I exist on the whiteboard and that my being is circumscribed by these definitions, to me that's more of the problem. So, because this whiteboard is just a construct in the mind that comes and goes. That's how I would kind of look at it. So the doership thing is just another one of those things where, if we're like really heavily invested into that doership, ownership, this is me and stuff, and then somebody's coming along and they're kind of trying to put the question mark on that a little bit. Say, wait a minute, is there more? Are you really so sure that that's what's going on? Is that the fullness of who you are? And even is that notion kind of true? Then when somebody say, well, okay, I guess I'm not doing anything then. But that's just another concept. One is I'm the doer, one is I'm not the doer. So those spiritual people that they get that, they hear that Advaitic pointer, which is only an expedient means, a temporary thing, to address an issue. Then they hear that teaching, the teaching is saying there's no doer. The doer is a concept, there is no doer is a concept. So we say, oh, that must be the truth then. That's the Advaitic truth, is that I'm not a doer, that I can't do anything. Then they start identifying with that concept. So, but there might be a middle way, as Buddha said, kind of like a middle ground in there. Maybe you're not a doer, maybe you're not a non-doer. Maybe you're not a concept.
Is there not intelligence in beingness? Is there not intelligence?
Yeah, I think so.
Birds have intelligence. Every symbol in this world, grass has an intelligence. It knows how, when to grow, when not to grow. We're part of all of that. So there must be an intelligence to this thing called a body. And so possibly, I go back to, if I made that point about the book, that based on, to me, your inner state would have indicated to me if intelligence was guiding, wisdom, however you want to call it, to say, you know what speaks to me right now is I might pick up a book on relationships next time I'm out. Not stuck on it, not invested, I don't have any expectations, whatever, but something seems to speak to me.
And that does, it clearly happens.
And then I say, stop right there. That could be a reflection of beingness showing up as intelligence, reflecting into the world called you being a body.
Exactly, yeah. It's undeniably happening for everybody in this room, even right now. The thoughts are moving, the intuition's moving, the pull to here, the pull there. We can't deny that this intelligence is functioning.
Sure.
It's just, the only thing is, again, how we are assigning that or interpreting that. Are we saying that intelligence is moving due to the presence of a defective me running the show? Or maybe without that defective me concept, that intelligence is actually running the show. Not just for this body, but for that body and every body in this room, and every bird and tree and everything.
I get back to that. I'm sorry, Barbara, share something.
What if I run the thought back? When, from the thinking through the feeling, it always goes to beingness. So I know that I didn't think the thought.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's what I saw. Yeah. But I saw one day this notion that I'm thinking the thought, that I'm doing that. It just was clearly, intuitively, just obvious that it was totally false. Because, even if I just sit here, I just sit here like this, and basically it's as simple as this: a thought arises.
Right.
Where did it come from, and who did? I did not know and plan that, so I didn't do it.
That's right.
So what I realize is all the thoughts and perceptions and everything is just arising spontaneously.
That's right.
And that's all I need. That's all I need to know. Now, it becomes effortless living.
They were free.
Yeah.
No shame, no pain.
If you didn't, people say, well, I did this, and they want the pride if I did it. But then when something goes wrong, they say, well, I feel guilty because
Mm-hmm.
But when you take out that ownership idea, it just evens it all out. You're not saying, I did this or I did that, and you lose the praise and the guilt.
That's right. I find I can have anything running through the conduit, any thought or feeling, and I'm okay.
Yeah, and I would say that I think that is the way it's happening for everybody in this room,
That's right.
whether they know it or not.
That's right.
Now, we may have this artificial overlay, this learned concept, which is very flimsy, somehow pasted onto it, saying, I'm doing it, I'm doing it, I'm doing it. And I would say, maybe it's not so, maybe it's not that way.
Right. And if they take the time to run the thought back, they know they're not doing it that way.
Yeah. I think that's,
Just
I think,
beings.
I agree with that. Yeah. So imagine there is I describe it like, Atlas carrying the world on his shoulders. to see the absence of that reference point, it just, the burden of life
That's right.
falls off your shoulders. Now, do you become irresponsible? No. Because that conduit is intelligence.
Mhm.
And speaking conventionally, you have a lot of experience and compassion and knowledge, and there's an intelligence there, and that's not going to go away. So are you going to, people sometimes say, well, you know, if there's no reference point, it means I'm just going to become a mass murderer and I'm just going to do all this crazy stuff because there's no more limits. But it doesn't actually work that way.
It doesn't work that way.
Because
Impossible.
you know, all those troubles and distortions are more coming from the separation concept. So without the separation concept, whatever's left is not chaos, unintelligent hatred, violence, murder.
Mhm.
I found, most people that I've seen, it's actually the total opposite of that. Because it's no longer, when I'm afraid and separate and protecting myself and I want all these things for me, that's when it's all distorted. But when I don't have that concept, now people, it's not like you suddenly fall apart and you're a jellyfish and you can't do anything and there's no choice, and it doesn't actually work there. And I guess all I could say is because the body-mind is an expression of the intelligence. And most of the people that I've seen that have been into this stuff or had a feel for it were the most sensitive, compassionate, and understanding people that I ever met. Or certainly, I mean, I don't want to put them on pedestals because we're all that anyway, but still, but in general, the theme was that these people were not selfish and distorted individuals with a lot of problems. It was the total opposite.
But it doesn't have to be that way.
What?
If dysfunction arises once in a while or resistance to what's happening, like if you said there was some back and forth with your wife,
Yeah.
look, I never see you, John, why are you going to D.C.? And there
Yep.
was some argument. That doesn't invalidate you as a teacher. Even if you did say a couple 4-letter words. I may not like that,
Yeah.
but there's some things that you said all day
Mhm.
that were good pointers.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about how John behaves,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, well, a lot of that, because you're not micromanaging everything, it's like, because again, that whole non-doer perspective, conduit type perspective, is really addressing. It takes a lot of the sting out of all that stuff because you're not even owning it personally.
Right, so there's no need to even put a check mark next to, okay, I was non-resistant
No,
today.
because that's a totally
or
self-centered
I was
judgment.
compassionate.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
if the thing arises, either it was something you couldn't worry about, or the person isn't there to apologize to at the time, it either happens or it doesn't.
Yeah. Otherwise, it would be somebody. If you're constantly editing your behavior, it's very self-centered.
Sure.
My behavior. Look at me. And then you got some standard of where'd you get the check boxes, and how do you know what's right and wrong? Because
right.
even to say, okay, I said a 4-letter word, and that's not wrong. It's so arbitrary. So it's not sweating that and not owning that and not feeling so burdened and looking at the big picture, in the big scheme of things. If you had a little argument or something came up or whatever, because basically it came up. So what are you going to do? If you can say something like if you can say apologize, then you will, but sometimes you can't. So what, are you going to sit up all night agonizing about how you couldn't apologize? That's kind of a waste of energy. So go to bed, go to good night's sleep. Maybe tomorrow, maybe you'll get a chance to say something if it comes up. Now, so I agree with you. Yeah. It's kind of a funny discussion because the mind wants to try to pin down on it's this way. It's never like that.
Well, it all gets back to what you're saying. It gets back to what do I take myself to be. So I can't claim the times when I was compassionate, and I can't claim the times where I was rude.
Mm-hmm.
This is all just happening. The body, all the actions are coming and going,
Mm-hmm.
and I remain. So why do I need to worry about these happenings? I don't have to worry about it at all.
Yeah.
Or make a generalization that, okay, all 50 people in here are more compassionate than the average group. Who cares?
Yeah.
It's meaningless.
But all I would say though is that my view on that is that without that limited identity, in other words, the perspective that you're seeing of what you are, that a lot of those beliefs and ideas and identifications, they don't have any more juice or investment anymore, and they just kind of settle automatically. Not because you're doing it, because you're great and you have all this insight, but just because they're no longer interesting or they're no longer believed anymore. So you're not a separate person with something wrong, and all those ideas that build on that don't define you anymore. So you're not going to be spending a lot of time, cycling in that stuff, all energized into it. And, if you do, but so there is an actual thing that just by the mechanics of it, a lot of that crap just kind of settles down automatically. Not because you did anything, but because it's just the root of it is not up for you anymore. And that you just see that anyway. It's just like I never went on a program to improve myself or improve my behavior or become more compassionate. To me, all that would be completely artificial. And I wouldn't even touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, a lot of the stuff that I used to cycle in and just be really invested in is no longer my experience. It's just simply because of lack of interest, or it's just not me anymore.
Yeah, and that's a very small group that would appreciate that.
Yeah.
The general public doesn't even want to talk about that. Then a smaller subset is into non-duality, and they favor, okay, this one acts a certain way.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to Gilbert because he can be a little confrontative, but John's more compassionate. You guys both have a good message, and there's value there. But some folks are going to be discriminating because they look at the messenger instead of the message.
Yep, I agree.
What about where do patterns come from then? I mean, people get traumatized as children in their families, and they grow up repeating patterns.
Yes.
And then it all starts to feel personal. What?
That's it. That's where it comes from.
But I know, but then isn't it personal then? Doesn't that make a certain amount of thought or reaction personal? Because there are people, like, we know people have specific temperaments, and we know how to push certain people's buttons, and it just seems so complicated that we start out in the world in a family, in an environment, and it all acts on us, and then we can kind of predict our behavior when we grow
Yeah, but
up.
that's happening. The tree behaves a certain way. Another tree has another thing. That bird, everything in the appearance has a genesis and something that brought it into being, and it has a kind of a characteristic.
So that's not personal.
But it's not personal. I mean, I don't know. There's a tree out there. It only blooms a certain sort of way. Its leaves are a certain shape and no other shape, and that's the way. And you can't change that. But is it wrong and is it personal, or is it just a manifestation? It depends. To me, there's nothing wrong with that.
And it has no inherent meaning to the tree on how to be.
And it's not self-concerned or worried
Only
about
the
it.
human being is the only one that has an investment.
Trees don't think.
You don't have squirrels saying, that's it, I've been a squirrel for 15 seasons, that's it, I'm going to be a tree. And then we have a lot of deformed squirrels looking like trees. Or, you have nature is in perfect harmony.
Yeah.
Other than the human being, my reflection, is the only thing in this world as a symbol that's that has seemingly the illusion of a choice to be other than the authenticity of this intelligence and what they are. We have a way of adapting, of adjusting it, and I think based on results, we didn't do a very good job with it, and that's why we're in some of the predicaments that we're in.
Yeah, I and again, we're just kind of drawing theoretically, but my take on that is this human capacity for conceptual intelligence, which is a very powerful tool.
Yes.
But it creates this ability to create realities that don't exist. That's the power of it. I can design a battleship or something in my head and then go out and build it. And it's all completely imaginary at first. But on the other hand, I can conceive myself to be something that I'm not ultimately, and then get invested in being something that's purely imaginary. But I couldn't do that without the conceptual mind, I don't think. So that this once we develop this ability to create language and separation and identity and all this kind of stuff, and then begin to almost allow the concept to override the reality, and then say that's what I am, and that seems to be something. I mean, other animals might do it to some extent, but I mean we're very good at it as human beings. But don't deny the value and power and the utility of that.
Oh, for
because
sure.
you
Yeah.
couldn't, all the things that have been done by humanity, a lot of those things could not also be done without that. So it's just an understanding, it's like fire is very powerful, but it's very dangerous. So just be aware of it.
I mean, 2 plus 2 is 4, and it's a very helpful concept. And without a mind, you wouldn't know that, or how to start your car and get home. Today, you need the mind, and that's a very helpful thing.
Yeah.
I think for myself, it's only when I'm defining who I am,
Mhm.
or asking the question, and that's where the only domain that I've inquired that I really feel the mind really fails in. That it will never answer who I'm, or will never answer it correctly. Let me say,
Yeah.
from my personal view. But everything
No, I
else, the
totally
mind
agree.
can certainly make battleships, take ore out of the earth, make steel, make airplanes, can do a lot of good stuff.
Can I
Yeah.
go back to just, say a person fights in a war and gets PTSD and is back in his life or her life, and it's 4th of July. Firecracker goes off, person gets triggered and shuts all the lights out, locks his door, and gets into bed for the rest of the day, is traumatized. How is that not personal based on this person's experience?
Well, what's the purpose of the question, really? You are. And all I'm saying here is, let's just, since that's the most important thing, is the fact of our being, let's give that a consideration to make sure that we don't have a doubt on what the nature of being is. That's really what I'm talking about. Now, you're kind of in a theoretical kind of question about psychology and what people would do, and I'm not a professional psychologist. I could just come up here with some off-the-cuff answer that could be bullshit. I don't know.
No, I'm just, what made me think about it was the idea, well, you had a thought, you had a compulsive reaction. It's not personal. It's just...
Well, it gets back to what she was saying about looking at the nature of thought itself to see if thought by nature is personal. And if it is
That's what I'm
personal,
asking.
where is that person? What I would say, and I think what she would say, we can find the thought, but we're having a hard time finding the person or the individual.
Okay.
Well, I have
So-
a hard time finding that you created that thought, and that you, the person, individual, created it, or it's just part of consciousness unfolding in its magnificence. That's and nothing
No, I
is good or bad.
understand. That karmically somebody was in a war, they're working out their karma from so many
See, but
lifetimes.
the thing though
That's
is that
religion again.
but see, all the questions, all these kinds of questions are coming from like conceding the individual or the person.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, and again, conventionally we're not saying, we're not just saying, there's nobody sitting there and it's just a bunch of atoms and we're all just kind of disintegrate. There are apparent forms and shapes and characteristics, and that body is different than that body, and the way you talk is different than the way you talk. But at that level, there's an apparent, see that inequality or just, like appearances.
The stories. And
Yeah, and there's nothing in what I talk about that is really contradicting that basic fact of manifestation is everything, every single thing, even if it's a leaf on a tree, is a distinct manifestation that is very unique and conditioned at that level by whatever brought it into being. The seed of an oak is going to blossom as an oak tree, and that leaf will look a certain way, not another way. But there's no suffering in that. There's no limitation. The tree isn't saying, gee, I wish the leaf was a different shape, I'd be a better leaf, or something like that. So we can grant the presence of diversity and all that, and the appearance, and even have it, not in this meeting, but in another kind of discussion about, let's say, psychology or biology or sociology, we could talk, I think, meaningfully. Why do those things come into being? What were the causes? Why did that person get trauma? Why is that leaf shaped a certain way? I'm sure there'd be some reason, but we wouldn't have to there isn't a necessity to bring into that, even those discussions, something where somehow in that mix I suddenly have a personal problem.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to, a lot of times in these kind of discussions, it's important to be aware of the level at which we're speaking. Are we speaking of you in the ultimate sense, of the deepest sense of what you truly are? Or maybe we're speaking biologically or sociologically or something like that. That's okay. But but to be like kind of flipping all back and forth and thinking, when I talk about, why does John say this, and then I'm trying to fit that in with kind of some non-duality thing, and I'm trying to, it can get kind of confusing. That's why, people, like if you have a toothache, you go to a dentist and you get it fixed. You don't sit around saying, who am I? Who has a toothache? You could. But intelligence is just more basic than that. If you have a toothache, you just kind of go to the right level and get it kind of addressed. But I do know spiritual people that when they get a toothache, they will not go to the dentist. They sit around saying, who has it, who has it, who has it? Because it's all kind of, it's too, it's just like, why? Why put that investigation on something that's just, such a kind of a basic practical thing, You don't say, So if they don't go to the dentist and get their tooth fixed, they don't get it. They end up with a toothache, and they probably still are. They're so it's kind of convoluted in what they're questioning. They don't see who they are either. So it's like, let the question be the question. This question in this meeting is really not so much about what the body-mind does in the appearance, because I think that has laws and rules and reasons
At a relative level.
at a relative level, but. And maybe we could, some of us, some people here are psychologists and scientists and all that, I'm sure they could say some really meaningful things about that. I could take a crack at it based on whatever I know, but it wouldn't be that valid necessarily. But the thing is, but this is more, what is the nature of what I am in the deepest sense that is here beyond any doubt? And we can, it is actually possible to turn and look at that and consider that and let the investigation, let the discussion be what is the nature of that. Now, and it's not that, what some people sometimes think, well, that means you're denying the appearance. I'm not denying the appearance. I'm just saying the appearance is an appearance.
I'm asking because when the appearances come up, beating oneself up is counterproductive. So I'm trying to, I would like.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's getting to the place. I would like to be able to get my mind out of the way so that I can experience it as impersonal.
Yeah, and the only and I can say again, my experience is that the only thing that really freed me out of that burden was what I'm trying to talk about today, which was getting kind of clarified on the identity. With that, for me in my life, without that piece, there was no relief, because everything that happened was personal. It was owned. I was guilty. It was right. It was wrong. I couldn't control it. I could control it. You got death, disease, and relationships, and finances, and in the ultimate sense, you couldn't control a single one of it, really. On the other hand, you've got this thing where you think you are, and it's such a conflict. And I had the same thing you did. One day I got really, really sick. And then it suddenly hit me, something is not, my model of reality and who I am and what's going on no longer fits anymore. Because my mind is saying I'm in control and I'm doing all this, and on the other hand I'm seeing this life-threatening kind of illness that I can't do, and even these doctors at the time, they said, there's no cure for that, we don't really know what's going on, and I'm sorry, we can't help you. It's like, uh-oh. Something doesn't fit anymore. So it was like life kind of saying that this assumption of how it works is not tenable anymore. At least that was my experience. And then, so then eventually leading to this questioning of, well, what am I anyway? Am I really a being, a person that's running this body-mind and controlling it? Is that really the way it is? And I didn't know the answer to that, because I, like a lot of people, just by osmosis, there was a default assumption that was the way, that was what it was. Because, you grow up and your parents say, look, go do this, little Johnny, and then you don't pick up your clothes, and then they say, you made a mistake, you should have done this, and then you start thinking, oh, I am doing that. Or if I do the right thing, I get punished, or I don't get punished, or whatever like that. So, like from a young age, you're getting a lot of society things are basically saying, you're kind of doing it, and you're actually kind of getting punished seemingly or rewarded for these concepts. And if you can fake it and make it work out a certain sort of a way, you get kind of rewarded. But somehow in the back of our minds, maybe we know that something's not You could be like a straight A student, doing everything perfect, but somehow in the back of your mind you're a total wreck because you like one little thing could go wrong and it, you can't keep it together. What if you get a B? What if you have to go home and you have to show your parents, a B? It's the end of the world or something like that. So it's just funny. I mean, I don't know. So I think it's just a call for, it's just to make it a topic of exploration and a curiosity and a wonder and a interest in this issue of what are we as a being. There's a body, there's a mind, there's thoughts, there's all these activities, but there's also other things here. Being, consciousness, religious aspiration, feelings, peace, insights, wisdom, and what. So in this whole thing, what is it all? How does it all fit? I mean, what's going on here? And somehow for me, and the reason I talk about this is that whole thing was like a stew, very complicated and very troubling and generating dissatisfaction, a problem. Like life does not feel at peace. And I did many things to try to address that. And the only thing that I found that for me seemed to work was what I'm trying to talk about here, which was and essentially the only thing I feel like when I try to say it in plain English was just a kind of a confusion on identity. It's like an identity crisis. It's like I don't know who I am. And I'm going through this world. There's this mortal body that can die any time. I don't have any control over it. And I'm supposed to be chipper and happy and thinking it's so great. And it's like, something is not right here. I think that's why a lot of people at that stage, they become spiritual, like Buddha and other people. They suddenly, it's like they realize it's like it's not, like the facade isn't really working somehow. Like he had a palace and a wife and money and a fame and a kingdom and all that stuff. And somehow he said, not cutting it. It's not gonna work. Now, why did he say that? A lot of people thought he was nuts. But I think he had that sensitivity where he could see the end point of all of these things, and he could see on the horizon what's not going to last. I can think I'm healthy and young, and I've got a wife and finances and riches and all that stuff, but he could see that was not going to be always there. And then what's going to happen when all of a sudden it's not there anymore? And then he realized, like, oh, wait a minute. So that's called the sense of suffering, or the sense of... So then he went out and tried to find an answer. And he claims that he did, and that's his whole thing. And somehow it does tie in with this, because if you look at that stuff, I think what even in the Buddhist thing, what they really are doing is they're still looking at the identity issue. Because what he's doing is he's looking at the body, mind, senses, brain, consciousness, and he's basically saying, is that me? And he came up with his answer, which worked for him. But the only thing I would underscore is that it looked again, there's another case of identity issue. Now, we can't just say Buddha said this, and this, and you're not this, you're not that, because we still have to do that looking and understanding ourselves. We can't be satisfied with his understanding. Even though I think it's a good understanding, because...
John, a question about...
Yeah.
It seems that a lot of times I'll be able to have a feeling of a clear understanding mentally, where like, hey, a thought comes up, I know I'm not the thought. But there's a sense that hasn't penetrated fully. Maybe it's hard to put it into a word, because let's say emotionally, I still hold on a lot in different ways.
Yeah.
Or my body will hold tension in certain ways. That it just feels like similar descriptions of feeling like deeper satisfaction, deeper peace, or resting. Certainly will sometimes happen in flashes, but not maintaining. And so, one obvious answer is, okay, when there is a tension, I can investigate that tension in the same way I've investigated my thoughts. But I just wanted to get your perspective on thoroughness.
Yeah, okay. Again, just my perspective. I don't think that will be conclusive. because it's like it's not. In my view, it's like it's not quite looking at the heart of the issue. In my view, non-duality is, you could frame it as, for example, what I'm not and what I am. Maybe you could look at it that way. But now, I could all day long go down this whole catalog that I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not a thought, and everything like that, and be pretty good at that. But I still wouldn't necessarily know what I am. I just know all what I'm not. So it's like somebody, searching for water, and they can say it's not a tree, it's not a rock, it's not a mountain, it's not this, and yet they still don't have the water. I mean, it's valuable knowledge, but it's not the knowledge. So I think that's why that the not this, or investigating the appearance is like a help or something like that. Maybe helpful. But still, I found for myself that wasn't the thing that could make it solid and conclusive. Because there's the elephant in the room in that question is, yeah, but who are you? So when I turned to that, to look directly into the nature of the being, of what I am, that's constantly here. There's something here with you that's there, throughout the thoughts and throughout the tension and throughout this and all that. And I kind of found, what we can also make that what we're looking at.
So when I do look at that, I have a question about doing that. Because in a certain way, I kind of answered that question after reading your book a couple days ago, but the original question was, or the original idea I had about that was, I know what that feeling is of presence or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, okay, the exercise that's being suggested here is that we just retrain our attention back onto.
Yeah, but it sounds good, but not really.
But then what I was finding is I had sort of labeled in my mind, oh, this is what awareness is.
Yeah.
And so I sort of forced my attention back into feeling that way I thought I would feel when I was being in awareness.
Yeah.
But what I started asking the last couple of days was, well, what is this awareness anyway?
That to me, that's better. That's closer.
And
See, the other is kind of like a practice, and I'm doing it, and I'm kind of imagining what it is, and maybe that's it, and it gets kind of tension.
It is a tension.
But the awareness that's here right now, there's no tension in that. It's just a fact of experience. It's present.
Right. Well, I thought I could put myself back into that awareness at will, and that was.
Well, the problem with that is who are you talking about?
But the other question is, what is the awareness? Because I could ask myself, who am I all the time? But there's a tension. There got to be tension in that for me too.
Well, there kind of is, but why not just be curious and childlike and have a kind of a sense of wonder about just seeing what is the nature of awareness.
What is it?
Don't posit that you're someone who needs to get back. You're going to force it. You're going to look at it. You're going to do all. To me, that's all kind of constructed. It's kind of like, it's not going to. I've tried all that stuff. It just doesn't really work all that well because it's kind of limited. It kind of comes and goes. You have to. It's effort, and it's kind of guesswork and stuff.
How do you know if you're seeing awareness or the ego's doing a good job of fooling you? If that's what you're saying.
Well, which ego again? What do you mean by the ego? Like I said earlier, I don't know if you're here, the ego is the concept, the imaginary concept that I stand apart from that. Right. It's not a thing. There's no ego. It's just an assumption. Right. So I don't know if there is an ego doing anything or not. But awareness...
How can you have confidence?
Awareness is a pointer. But if we use that pointer, like there is a natural awareness here. It's self-evident, very simple. And it's not being generated by an ego or some distorted thing. It's not very tricky. It's actually kind of simple in a certain way. Just a simple, ordinary knowing, and just that. I mean, and the natural question, without framing it or turning it into some complicated thing, but just a curiosity to just look that way, to just consider and wonder and be curious. What is that? What's the nature of that? And And it's already here. It's already present. It's not, you know. I mean, it's a tricky thing to kind of talk about because you know, all that talk like that implies that it's not here and that you got to get it and you blah 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 blah. That's all wrong. It's already done. It's like it's the natural everyday awareness in which everything's happening beyond any doubt. That's all.
So I'm talking about trusting that experience.
Who? Why? Trusting what? Oh, we're saying awareness simply is. It's the one constant. Okay, it's not, and it's an undeniable constant because you can't even have that doubt, you know, without that. Even that doubt is riding on the presence of that awareness. The awareness is prior, you know, to the faith, to the trust, to the looking, to do I have it. All those things are riding on the concept part of it. So we're just trying to let it be very simple, let it be very unstructured, and kind of come back, strip it back to something so clear, so evident, so beyond doubt, that even your mind can't doubt it. There's nothing in it that can admit to a problem. Self-evident, inescapable being and knowing that takes no effort whatsoever. That whether you think about it or don't think about it doesn't change that presence of that. I guess maybe hearing about it or being pointed to that or kind of thinking, being curious, to just acknowledge the presence of something like that, like, you know, to kind of notice that a little bit. You know, if I don't know if it's so much about trusting it exactly, but if you were going to trust something in this life, that's what I would trust, because everything else is impermanent. And if there's something here that's constant and always with us and that we can rely on, in my opinion, it's got to be that. So to me, maybe that would be enough to push us over and be willing to take a look and see what that is.
Just gave these a little flip switch.
Okay, yeah. Trust the one thing in your experience that even your own mind can't deny. That's a key to this, really. Like, why are those teachers? Why are they so confident? Why do they blah 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 blah? It's this and that. Or why do they seem like they, you know? Because it's not because they got something and they achieved the confidence. It's because they're looking at something in our experience that literally cannot be doubted. And so, like, there's a confidence, like that sense of being. You know, you can say a lot of things in this world, like, you know, maybe I'm this, maybe I'm that, maybe yes, maybe no, but you can't actually say, maybe I'm not here, or maybe I don't exist. I mean, you can try to say it, but it doesn't make any sense. That song I sang earlier says, even to start with the fact of your being, what else could actually be so clear as that? Even when you doubt the existence of that, it proves that it's here, because you have to be present to doubt it. So if you're going to have faith or trust in something, pick something that can't be disputed or something. And it may be that that's the only thing in life that has that quality. You know, this body is come and go because, I mean, I don't know how long it's going to last. My opinions are coming and going. My beliefs are coming and going. Whether so-and-so is enlightened or not, maybe, maybe not. Whether I'm so-called enlightened or not, I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But there's something interesting about my sheer presence that doesn't seem to, I can't really flip it back and forth like that. I can't say, maybe I am. So suddenly I discover something in myself that feels kind of different. It has a different order of reality, so to speak. So, wow, there's something here that, even if I doubt it, or question it, or something like that, or have an opinion of it, it doesn't seem to change that. So that might be interesting. Might be worth exploring. Somebody did tell me one time, yes, the only thing you can never doubt is the fact that you're being, which is interesting.
Can you say that again? The only thing that what?
The only thing that you can never doubt is the fact of your being. Somebody's opinion about it, but probably a lot of truth in that. You know, let's say that we think there's a teacher out there who's enlightened, and everybody thinks they're enlightened. Well, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I don't know what enlightenment is. Maybe he is. Maybe he's a great fake. I don't know. Whatever. But maybe Ramana was enlightened. Maybe Ramana didn't even know what he was talking about. Maybe Ramana was like one of those movies that he never existed. He was just a scam. Somebody created this figure. But that doesn't change my sheer existence itself. So that may give us a reason why that faith, that initial faith, might be warranted, might be these things that kind of give us a reason why we should even look at this stuff. So.
Well, as I heard you spoke, what I got to see was the pattern, the wave. That's the history of this body, mind, ego, or whatever. So you said something and it flipped the switch on.
You kind of see that a little bit.
That's just a pattern that started when I was a baby. This goes with this.
Yeah, like what can I believe in, or what can I put trust in, or,
yes,
or what's worthy of my
trust.
trust.
Was an issue, and anyway, we don't need to jabber about that.
I understand.
Interesting, thank you.
Good. Okay. All right. Well, anybody else burning questions?
I think I understand some. Like, how do I say this? Intellectually, I understand the concepts, and I have those moments where I step through the mirror and Maya, or whatever you want to call it, and I experience that. And one of the things I find real interesting is when I'm in it, my ego will say, "You can go back there anytime you want. Why don't you come out here and play some more?" And usually it will draw me out, and then I'll find that it's not so easy to go back. But I know one of my questions along, and I think that some of the people is that, like, how did you do it? Still the question. How did you wake up? Did it happen all of a sudden, or what were? Did you eat certain foods, or? Well, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think we went through that in the beginning,
did you?
But it's okay though. But I never did wake up, and I don't believe in waking up.
Okay. Well, there you go.
See, here's the thing though. Your being. You're present right now. Is that intellectual?
No.
Okay. Now, everything that we speak about spiritually or put into a word, that is conceptual. But what I would point out to you is that this, being what you are, can never be intellectual. Because being is not intellectual. It's a fact.
It's intelligence.
Yeah. Well, whatever. That being is conscious. It's aware. But that's not a concept. And if people say, well, I intellectually understand it, they don't really understand what we're talking about. Because the word being or the concept is not really your actual being. Now, even right now, you are the one who is being. You are the being. Because you're present. And what you are is conscious. Now, if you didn't realize that, this thing that everybody's trying to get to and abide in and all that stuff, right? You're already there.
Right.
You're it. Now, you literally cannot get out of your being, even if you wanted to. It doesn't matter what you think, say, or do. Now, and you don't have to have a special awakening or enlightenment to be. So the real sages, like Ramana, they contradicted the teaching of enlightenment. They actually did. They said it's a provocative concept that it's not true, because the being is ever attained and it's always present. So there you are sitting there, present and aware beyond any doubt, self-evident, not intellectual knowledge, not something it's just you've heard in a book or something like that. The thing that we just didn't maybe see or appreciate was that basically that's it. That's all it is. And the fact that we ever thought it was something other than that was the concept. So one day it got pointed out to me, like, okay, John, you've been studying Advaita and Ramana and all these non-duality for all these years and stuff, but you appear to have missed the simplicity of it. Because it's already here and you're that and there's no doubt about it, and didn't you know that is what this is? And, okay. Now, did I awake up? Not really. Because when I asked you those questions and you answered like that, you could see what I'm talking about. There's no special, now suddenly she's there. You're not any different than you were before. So that's why they say the self is ever present, ever attained, needs no realization, needs no anything like that, if we look to see just in all simplicity kind of what it is. And then what you're going to find is like the suffering only came from looking away from that. Ignoring my being, how do you think I'd feel if I ignored my true nature and spent my whole life looking away from it and taking it to be something that it's not? That is the suffering. And that's the intellectual knowledge. And that is always suffering because you're not a concept, right? So it's just a simple clarification of that. Because if you get the taste of that and realize you're already home, as far as I'm concerned, awareness or consciousness is awake. If you want to even have that concept, okay, you're already enlightened. You're already awakened. Because the nature of being is to be awake and conscious. So if you must have the notion of when are you going to awaken, the fact is it's already happened, and it's all done already. And now you just you can say, oh, I'm just going to be what I am. And then without that, then there's no more rationale or reason why you have to be going back to concepts that are trying to tell you what you are, because none of that is what you are. So if you don't go to the concept and you abide, you be as you are, like Ramana said, that's basically it. Because I think you'll find there's nothing wrong. You're present and aware beyond any doubt. You can't do anything about it. You're not a concept. You're present. You're awake. And even your own mind can't contradict the basic point of it. And so I met somebody in my life, this teacher that I met, he pointed this out and he said, full stop. And he didn't have any more teaching. He didn't have any more satsang. He didn't have any more anything to do. No meditation, no nothing. Just basically full stop. What's wrong with right now being what you are if you're not putting a concept on it? And what we can do is just simply acknowledge that fact and let it permeate the implication of that, and see kind of non-conceptually get friendly with that, or see what we're talking about here. To not that it's going to add to it, not that you're going to get anything more, but just it's almost like stop dead in your tracks and kind of realize it's like, oh, because what it really means, what it actually means is the search is over with. It means the satsang and the reading and the enlightenment and the path and the this and all those years and all the pursuing, if we take this to heart, it actually means it's all done. And to me that is exciting, and was certainly something I wanted to hear, or was open to hearing at that time, because I had done it so long on the hamster wheel. When somebody said, it's this and it's that simple, full stop, and it's it. I said, okay. I was not in at that stage in the yabbit mode. That's for Abbott and Costello. Yabbit, but because see what you find is that just try to get if you can get some kind of taste of the nature of being, even in this moment. The sweetness, simplicity, and obviousness of that, and the clarity of that, and the stability of that, and the way that it, for lack of a better word, the way that it feels, or the way that you experience that somehow. And just kind of sit there and drink that in a little bit, and then kind of you're going to start to feel like, when my mind comes up and says, yeah, but this, all this stuff, and you're going to rush off to all that, and what are you going to get out of that that's better than this? And all this, what about deep sleep, and what about this, and what about, these are things the mind brings up, and we can talk about those things. But you'll find that there's no peace, there's no joy, there's no fulfillment, there's no certainty, there's nothing. It's like biting on a piece of granite there's like no juice. So like you're sitting in the pool of cool water with nothing wrong with you, and you're already that without any effort, and it's fine. And then you want to go off chewing on stones for some reason, and at some point it just your own intelligence, it suddenly dawns on you why you've been chasing down a mirage. But now you know why, because you have a taste of that, and you see what you truly are, and then it just ends that whole thing, because nobody searches for water in some mirage if they actually know any better. They only do that because they don't understand. There's nothing there. So once I see that my being, the true self, the true nature, is not in the mind, it's not being enhanced by the concept, that these questions don't deliver me into that, because I'm already there. So why should I go out through the mind, answer all these questions, and what's the net result of that whole process is I satisfy the mind, the question drops, and I forget about it, and where do I go back? Well, I go back right where I started. So this thing of going into the mind and then answering the question and coming back, it's like, after a while you're going, well, why am I doing that? So why not just full stop and be what you are, and just have a global intelligence and insight that feels something like, the answer is not in the mind. The mind does not know what being is. It never will know. I'm not in the mind. What's being pointed to is not in the domain of concepts. Period. Let the mind go do what it does. But let me be what I am, which is my true being. And that's about what it kind of gets down to. Then even the notion that I'm separate from that, or I'm going, is actually out there in the concept. Because you're not a separate person standing apart from the being. Then that you are the being. I am that. So the last pointer the so-called teacher ever gave was, you are that. And there's nothing beyond you are that. What are we going to do beyond being that? I don't know. So, but in those traditions, they led up, look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this. There's reality, there's peace, there's this. And then at the last point, they laid it all out. Oh, by the way, this reality is what you are that. And it says in those Indian books, basically, and there the teaching ends. And so then the disciple goes her way, does whatever they want in the play of the universe, because there's no imperative to do anything. You can have a palace, you can be an ascetic, you can be a family person, you can be rich, you can be poor, you can do whatever you want to do. There's no more do this, do this, do this, do this, get this, because it's like the fulfillment of something like that, So that's this is what it's kind of getting to. But so it's easier just to just start with the point that you are that. See, because then all this stuff, it looks a lot different. Somebody says, but how do I stay there? Well, I don't know. It doesn't. When you are that, how do you stay there? I don't know. Because there's no real answer, because it's a false question. How do you stay in the being? And that's what we were saying before early in the day. You start these questions. Yeah, but how do you actually get out of it? Did you ever actually leave your being? No, you never did. And that being is the awareness, the peace, the oneness, all that stuff like that. And our direct experience actually shows that nobody ever left it. And if you never left it, well, what do you have to do to get back to it? You don't have to do anything to get back. So it's kind of like this whole spiritual thing, and everything the whole structure of the separate self and everything built on it, including the spirituality, it just all comes tumbling down. And there's no more retreats to go to with me. I'm not going to let you go to a retreat with me, because why do I want to build up some false thing anyway? It's like, whether you do something or don't, you're already that. So I don't want to, only give a pointer that say, well, hey, look at this, see what you are. But don't say, and now go deeper. Now stabilize in it. Well, I don't know. I don't. That's why I don't think that those teachings were ever consistent with non-duality, because I never did find that anyway in the historical non-duality about get it and then start doing something. Well, anybody else? Yeah.
What about, let me language it the way I don't want to, this what am I here to do kind of question. And before you were talking about you're both doing and non-doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you just sit reading a book until, the bird comes along and poops on it and says it's time to close the book, and something else comes along and it's somebody knocking on the door saying, this is the service I want you to offer me. So what I'm wondering is that balance between listening and the intellect trying to answer these age-old questions?
Well, for me, the question, there's two issues. One is there's a false, it's reintroducing the false separation into the question.
Right.
What do I do, and what do I do next, and how do I, and it's back into the I thought. So what is that tree out there? What is it? Is it saying, what do I do in spring? How do I live? What do I do next? And yet it is functioning. So Jesus or somebody said that body's like a tree walking or something like that. But so there is a body and it's functioning. and it'll go on. It goes on. So the easiest, and so the question itself is like a little bit of a falsity, because it implies that there is a separate being kind of there, and somehow that's the way it's functioning. So it's not really functioning that way. So, but on the other hand, just
I guess that to rephrase it.
yeah.
Will there be an energetic attraction? It's like, in other words, if I'm really being me, then I'm exuding an energy that's being me that I've been presumably squishing a little bit. So then that would be an attractive force.
Well, take all these fearful, limiting thoughts, these thoughts that hold us back and make us judgmental and afraid of doing this and doing that, and all these kind of constructs. Just kind of strip that off a little bit, and then there's going to be a functioning there that's not like there already is a functioning there. But sometimes when we have all these ideas about who I am, all these binders, these limiting filters, so what it just like that those things kind of fall away, because that we're seeing that that's not really my identity. So the natural intelligence functioning through the body mind without the dualistic filter. That's what happens. Now, is it you doing it? No. Is it an individual? No. But it's life, living you, life functioning through without getting kind of distorted through that I'm a limited person. That's all. But it's already doing that. It's always been doing that. Like when the sperm and the ovum came together and that little baby grew. Were you doing that? But it was happening. It grew. It grew fingers. It came out. It grew up. It became a child. It had all these capacities, all these wonderful things. It never was thinking, "What am I doing?" Something like that. But somewhere along the line, we picked up this concept, this thing of so somehow I am separate from everything, and there's something wrong with me. But what I'm saying here is that is not true. That child at that stage didn't have that idea. So, because it is a concept, and because it's learned, and because when we examine it, it doesn't really hold water, that intelligence, seeing through that, dissolves that, dismantles that concept. So just like that energy of the child just functioning in a body, living moment by moment, following life flowing through, that like that. So. And that's just like a side benefit that just it happens anyway. I mean, because it's more like the way that it is. And thoughts will come up, and decisions will come up, and energies will come up, and they'll move you here, and they'll move you there, and you'll do this, and you'll do that, but never with ever a sense that there's something wrong with you anymore. So somebody described this one time about what does this feel like. It feels like there's nothing wrong anymore. No problem. Nothing to fix. And that means, the body, mind, whatever is functioning spontaneously, never having to look at that by saying, it shouldn't be happening, it's wrong, it's right, whatever. It's definitely recommend trying it. So, really looking at the stuff and seeing if you can get a taste of that perspective. To just simply live your life without feeling like there's a problem or that there's something wrong anymore. Because just think about it. Is there anything wrong with your being? It doesn't even make any sense. Something wrong with consciousness? Is there really something wrong with the body? I mean, like metaphysically off, like something. It's just so these concepts don't really even apply to our experience. So, but that notion, that concept of a limited self, we just assumed that was somehow a definition of what I am. But what I would say is that concept comes and goes. It's not what you are. You never were that. Therefore, all these problems and issues and doubts and psychological things, all for that person, they just kind of just like move out of the picture, which is nice. Yeah. So sometimes people say, I don't know, in this non-duality stuff, they say all the suffering and seeking and problems go on just as before. And I don't agree with that at all. I've never heard anybody, why would these people talk? Why would Buddha? Buddha said very clearly, he found the end of suffering. And people have said it for thousands of years, that this psychological suffering thing generated by this unexamined notion that we can see does resolve that. So this notion that we would sit around in these meetings and look at our true being and understand all this stuff and somehow come out of that whole thing seeking and suffering with all the problems, it's like, what? Why would we it'd be ridiculous. Why would we do this? So sometimes, so I don't, it's not my experience, but because all this kind of suffering that I'm talking about is kind of psychological, conceptual, based on an unexamined notion, and driven by that belief, that when it is examined and seen in the intelligence and no longer capable of being believed, that all of those things actually do settle down. That you don't look at this stuff and feel like a seeker. You don't look at this stuff and feel like there's something wrong. You don't feel like you have all these doubts about who you are. It just doesn't even really just not experienced that way anymore. In my view, so. Somebody have a question? Yeah.
I just want to say thank you. I've been sitting here with tears just flowing, like huge burden just lifted. And in that, when you talked about just maybe 10 minutes ago about, a lot of things in the outer world have been falling away from me for some time now. And there's no interest in them. And when you talked about there's no interest in following the mind, that's it.
Yeah.
It's just like I can see, because that just fell away so naturally. All these interests or people or just, it just falls away. It's just like.
Well, we only pursued those things, and the mind is fine, and we can have interests and do our thing in life. But I'm talking about that little interest, which I think you're talking about, where we're kind of still looking for who we are and trying to find the answer. And we only do that because there's that little bit of doubt that we're not sure where the answer lies, and so we want to keep going back to this thing, like maybe it can tell me what is true. And it starts to kick in, like you're saying, and we start to see why that it just naturally starts to reveal itself that that's not the answer, and so you lose that we lose that looking for who I am in the mind, or looking for how do I be okay, or what do I do, or what's the right this about me, and all that stuff. So yeah, the whole net result of this is what you're saying. It just settles down, and I'm not looking for who I am in the concept. And then what's here? It's okay. There's nothing wrong with kind of what's present, which is extraordinary. It's like we're doing all these things, and then it's almost like when that just settles down, and you're not doing anything.
Or to be somebody so that everybody else around you will be okay. To just drop that.
Yeah.
That's like a piece of it.
Yeah. So it's a very natural, organic thing. I didn't struggle to see this. I didn't work on it so much. I realized all those years. There was just a little bit of unclarity about what was going on. Like I hadn't seen it. I hadn't really noticed what was going on, and a few good pointers that just kind of helped me to see what I had started to see myself and was already growing. And you wouldn't come to meetings like this. People wouldn't go to meetings if that insight and that perspective obviously was not already happening. Because who wants to go to a meeting where they're kind of saying, well, you're not what you think you are, unless you are already starting to doubt or wonder who you are. So, okay, that's a good. Thanks for sharing that. It's a good experience. Well, I could do a song if you'd like. Why don't I do that to wrap up? Well, I guess we're supposed to wrap up at 4, which is 10 minutes from now. Let me do a couple of songs to kind of smooth it out a little bit and relax it a little bit. So my way of meditating is singing, I guess. So hopefully it works. Let's see. Got a couple of different ones. Let me do. This one feels like the energy right now. I wrote this one, I don't know, this year sometime, but it's called In This Moment, and just trying to show how, what we're talking about and what this gets down to is essentially here already, in this moment, it's already present. And to, kind of point to that. And so let's see how it goes. True peace you long for is so very near, without even seeking. It's already here. Let go of your worry, your doubt and your fear. Before the next question, the answer is clear. Right now, in this moment, can you deny pure light of knowing, looking out through your eyes? You don't need to wait too long or to go too far. You don't need a single thing to be who you are. It's only a notion. Something is wrong. Your own fearless being is here all along, and no one is separate. You can't stand apart from the timeless perfection that shines in the heart right now, in this moment. Can you deny pure light of knowing, looking out through your eyes? You don't need to wait too long or to go too far. You don't need a single thing to be who you are. The true peace you long for is so very near. Full stop. maybe one more for the road here. So this one's called Who Are You? I'm trying to give a couple of pointers, kind of point in that direction. So it goes like this. Like pictures passing on a movie screen, you see the people and changing scenes moving through. Who are you? Like ocean waves ebb and flow, your thoughts and feelings come and go, they're changing too. Something here you can't deny. Take a look and see what remains, always untouched and free. The ever-present shining light, wide awake and clear, radiant space in which all of life the mind creates an identity made of a person's memories, but is it true? Who are you? You might attain a quiet state where thoughts are absent like an empty slate with nothing in view. Something here you can't deny. Take a look and see what remains, always untouched and free. Be ever-present, shining light, wide awake and clear, radiant space in which all of life. Like pictures passing on a movie screen, you see the people and changing scenes moving through. But who are you? They're moving through. Who are you? Well, I guess we can call it a wrap there.
So if I can just make an announcement. So tomorrow we're having another session from 10:30 to 12:30. So if you haven't signed up for that, you're very welcome to come. And then in the afternoon, instead of going to lunch, John expressed an interest in, sort of hanging out more informally with us. So we're going to have a potluck. So it'll cost you $5. That kind of covers our expenses. And then if you can bring something healthy to share, food to share, that'd be great. So, and you don't have to decide till tomorrow. That's fine too. Except for the food part, you may, you may want to think about that in advance. But anyway, any questions about tomorrow?
It's $20 for the session, $5 for the food and potluck.
$5 for
And
we'll provide the drinks and other things, and then if you could bring something to share, food to share, that'd be great.
And then there's just informal time with John.
Yeah.
Yeah, when is that? That's after, so the talk is what?
10:30 to 12:30.
Oh, okay,
and then after 12:30,
okay,
then we have our potluck. So.
Yeah, enjoy. If you do come, I mean, it'd be nice to get to know you a little bit better, or talk to you afterwards, or whatever. I'll also be here, a little bit now. So, but thanks for coming. I appreciated everybody's questions and comments and presence and stuff. I believe it or not, I get a lot out of it. I kind of enjoy it. It's meaningful for me to see where you're coming from and what you have to share. I think everybody has something valuable to contribute, and sometimes I think we kind of shortchange ourselves. We know a lot and we have a lot to share about this stuff. So it's good to see it. Good for me to see that too. I enjoy it. So.
I'd like to thank you because when you answered my last question, I don't know what happened exactly, but I saw the space to see all that story, all that history as being impersonal. I found I can't put it into words, but I just saw that that you're not doing it, even all that history, or that you're not the author of it.
Good. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah,
it's important for people to hear that we can see this stuff and we can really have some insights. And I like these to be very interactive, where people can feel like they can share and say and they're contribute. So it's not a one-way thing, and it's not just me sitting here saying okay, this is it or something like that. So I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah, it was a relief to experience that.
Yeah. Good. Well, you're obviously very interested and very into this thing. You've been looking at it quite deeply. So I like to tell people, there's a place in this whole thing where the seeking ends, because being a seeker is not the true position, and having doubts and what is it and all that it's not destined or something to be just like forever that. There's a place in all this stuff where we look and say, oh, okay, now this is what it is, and I've seen it, and the experience is there too. So it's good for us to open up to that idea and realizing that the seeking stuff and these questions, they're supposed to end. They don't just go on like eternally or something like that.
Sounds like a wake up call.
That is such good news.
Yeah, we're good. All right, well.
Just in case, I may not be one.
Okay. Oh, wow.
I meant to get you.
I know. Tricky. Yeah, thanks for coming. Good to see you again.
I'm going to see you tomorrow. I just want to say it's been
yeah, good to see you again. Very nice. Yeah, appreciate your input. There is a lot to contribute.
You mentioned Roger on your consultation. Is that like you throw it on a
I do those like on a phone kind of thing. Yeah, I do this consultation like on a donation basis, which is optional. If you want to, I don't know. That's just one. If you want to email me and spend time to talk, between with you, it's not.
I don't have anything. I would like to be able to know that I do. I don't have it,
just in case.
I don't put you in that position. But sometimes, I just say, I might be reading a book or something, and I start putting up some questions, and I say, be nice if
Well, on my
John was a
website-
little closer, but you could maybe do a
Well, there's a couple things. One, I got that website, and there's a page on there that says something like consultation or something. If you click there, there's an email.
Yeah, okay.
And I check that every day.
Okay.
And I, you know, I'm up for, you know, going back and forth in email a little bit. But if you say, well, hey, you know, can we talk, then we'll set the time.
Okay. I'm not okay.
Good.
So,
Okay.
donation for me would be absolutely
Okay.
the right way to
And
go.
I can send you my number and all that.
Okay. All right. Thanks, John.
That's good. Okay. Yeah. That's a good. I put on the miles, the odometer, the peaking odometer going around and around and around and around. But I think, you know, at some point you're going to start feeling, can it ever really end? I mean, how does this really work? Is it possible? Yeah, it's not really put out there that you don't have to be a seeker, that you really don't, you know, your destiny in life isn't perpetually always be sitting there. You know, as someone who says, well, what is it, what is it?
Don't eat fried food.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll, we went back to the I'm sure that'll happen. Probably put a date.
Yeah, they keep selling, he's gonna keep Then I got
I'll probably beginning of my page, I kind of say like talk happening, and then they just want to email me or something. And then take it from there. Or tell your phone or announce I just want to make it when it's nailed down, when it's happening. Whatever you want to do. Yeah. And then I don't know, like these people, they're in on Mount out in the Hampton. Yeah, I think it is. It's like, you know how you have to fly into. Is that a little fly into a big one and take a photo yeah, anyway, I can't actually fly straight from California out to Iceland. You have to, I couldn't find that. Oh, really? I'll have to look at that. I was thinking I forgot it. But anyway, if and when I was searching I'm going to get a sense of maybe if these people open the faces wide, how big it is. Oh, yeah. I'm not, I have a job and a life, and I'm not really out there trying to drum up meetings. I usually these on kind of like hit and miss basis. Mostly just the people that I know.
Okay, did you, I mean, is it?